Hey, everybody, and welcome to HR After Dark. I'm Marcia.
And I'm Meghan, and we are so excited to share with you our latest guest, Anna Papalia, founder of Interviewology.
So nice to be here. Thank you
for joining us.
Welcome,
Thank
Anna.
you so much.
Tell us all about your journey. We have to start at the beginning.
Oh, wow. We're starting at the beginning?
Yeah, let's do it.
Nothing like the beginning.
Well, I won't go all the way back, but I discovered interview styles, I guess it was about 6-7 years ago. That's what led me to write this book and to create the social media platform that I'm known for now to give people tips on how to interview better. All because previously I was a director of talent acquisition, and I kept thinking, why don't we teach people how to do this? I mean, this is one of the most important things in someone's life, interviewing.
Totally
right?
agree.
But we don't teach it in colleges, we don't teach it in high school. So I immediately left the corporate world and started teaching at Temple University, where I worked with thousands of college students who I adored and just thought the way that we do this is really wrong and strange, and it's really highly dependent on someone's family, and you have to get these skills from places that really don't exist anymore. So I felt like there was a great need, and that's why I do what I do.
So when did the book come out?
January 31st of this year, a couple months ago.
It's geared toward interviewers and interviewees.
Exactly.
So I think one of the major issues is corporate and, entrepreneurs, people who, don't spend their time understanding how to interview. So this will help them as well to hire the best talent for their companies.
Yeah, shockingly, 90% of hiring managers are never trained to interview.
I'm not shocked at all. I'm really not. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm not shocked at all. So, no.
And we probably weren't, trained to interview.
I definitely was not.
And I think that you have to learn by figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's like kissing a bunch of frogs, but that's very expensive.
Yep.
And there's an easier way. We don't have to do that. There is training and there's science behind this.
Yeah.
And I think if we give our hiring managers these tools, they'll make better decisions. The process will be easier for everyone involved. And job seekers are better for it as well. And most of the time, job seekers actually have more experience interviewing than the hiring manager.
Totally agree.
So if you're looking for a job for 6 to 9 months, you might go on 30, 40 interviews. If you're a hiring manager with low turnover, you might only interview a couple times a year.
Right.
And you've never been trained. But the person in the position of power has less experience than the person interviewing.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
It is, but it's every day. It's every day. And they still make mistakes when interviewing. And that one decision can cost basically, a pipeline to go bad or sales to go bad because they like this person and it had such charisma. I'm like, yeah, well, where's the meat? How do you get that meat out of a person? And so talk about interviewology and you have a process behind it. Walk us through that process.
So one of the issues I had, with some of the ways that we talk about interviewing is a lot of it's like, just tell someone what they want to hear and memorize the perfect answers. Well, that's subjective. What the heck does that mean? How do you know what someone wants to hear? And then going back to hiring managers aren't trained to interview, and they're relying on a lot of these biased decision making. So instead, I think it's about more understanding who you are and being authentic in the process. So first, understanding your interview style. It's not about pretending to be something you're not. It's not about projecting this idea of perfection. That's not what any of us want in a job interview. Starting there is a sort of revolutionary way of interviewing and interview prep versus some of the things that we've been taught in the past.
I love that. So we had the chance to do our interview profiles, which was very exciting.
And easy to do, by the way.
It was so easy to do. I actually printed mine out because I was so impressed that it was 42 pages long. It thought you really encompassed everything, what to wear to interviews, what questions you should ask based on your interview type. So can we talk about ours? And I want to hear some feedback of like how other interviewees, interviewees, because we took it as a job seeker. So my style was charmer with challenger tendencies. And Marcia was challenger with charmer tendencies.
I love it. There's
so
some
we were
overlap.
kind of like, so it's interesting. So talk to us about that.
Well, first I have to ask, did you resonate with your profile when you read it over, your interview style? Did you see yourself in it as a charmer?
I did. Yeah, I would say yes. it's interesting. As I get older, I don't know the best way to say this. As I get older, it's easier to be authentic of who you are
sure. Yes.
on interviews. It's been a long time since I've been on an interview, but as you get older, you start to understand yourself. And so seeing that challenger come in, if I would have taken this 10 years ago, it would have been all charmer.
Yeah, perhaps, and maybe Marcia has rubbed off on you slightly, and you've rubbed off on her. So it's the variations. And the other thing is, your interview style as a job seeker is how you are as a hiring manager as well. So you're not a charmer as a job seeker, and then a challenger as a hiring manager. So I'm also a charmer in job interviews, and whether I'm hiring someone or seeking employment, I prioritize making a connection and being liked. Charmers want to be liked in a job interview. It's one of the best of our qualities, but it's also one of our worst.
Agree.
Because we might have a tendency to minimize some things to get someone to like us, which could lead to bigger problems down the road.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I really don't care if they like me or not. So
Spoken like a true challenger.
We know that.
But I also think it's age. I think in my 30s, it would have bothered me. Like I would have cared about that. And now I don't, because I know what I can do. I'm real to myself. I know what I want and what I don't want. But there's two others too. Talk about those as well.
Sure. So there are charmers, challengers, examiners, and harmonizers. Charmers want to be liked. Challengers, like yourself, want to be respected and heard. Challengers, I admire greatly, being a charmer, that they don't go in seeking to be liked. They're not accommodating. They want to get their questions answered. That's how they show their value, which I think is incredible as a charmer, right? Meghan, I'm looking at the other charmer
sell
here.
myself.
And then we have examiners. Examiners look at an interview like a test that they're either going to pass or fail.
Interesting.
And harmonizers look at an interview like a tryout for a team that they want to join.
Wow.
Where charmers look at an interview like a performance, where we are the star of the show. And challengers look at an interview like a cross-examination.
Pretty much.
If that fits.
That's why I ask a lot of questions.
I do see that. Yeah, I still see charmer tendencies in you, in that you want the best. I guess harmonizer is an interesting word too, but you still care about, not that challengers do not, but you care so much about, the O'Connor group and having a really inclusive culture, and you want everybody to get along. So I still see that charmer.
Yeah, well, you have to. And now it's like, how's the weekend? And I'll start somebody who's all like frazzled and angry. And I'm like, how's your family? Because you can go into a room too real quickly and look around the room and automatically know what that person likes. And I immediately go to that with questions just to break down that wall. And I've learned, being a female CEO as well, that sometimes there's a few roadblocks in front of us before the questions really come down. And I go right after what they love. And usually if they have pictures about something or a frame or something on the wall, they like that. I'm like, oh, you like golf? Where do you guys play? What's your handicap? All those fun things. And all of a sudden they calm down. And then when they start talking like real to me, we can go in and get what we want to get out of that person. And that's when the questions come, but it's really interesting, because I think with interviewing, everybody does it all the time. I do think they should teach us, like in college, how to do it the right way, what to ask, what not to ask, know your personalities, know this stuff. It would help out so much in their lives.
Oh, everybody. It'd help hiring managers and job seekers.
I betcha. So what kind of crazy questions are you getting about this? Because there's different personalities, there's different things, but it's not an answer to everything, but it's more of like a method and a process, and saying, hey, this is where I fit and this is my bucket. What kind of questions are you getting right now about the book?
Well, I think first and foremost about interview styles, it's really understanding what you prioritize.
Right.
If you're a challenger, you prioritize being respected and heard.
Right.
If you're a charmer, you prioritize being liked. And if you can go into an interview understanding that first and foremost, we all have different approaches.
Agreed.
Which is revolutionary, right? And whether you're a hiring manager or a job seeker, you fall in one of these 4 buckets.
Right.
So if going into an interview, you're a charmer, you can be prepared that this person is going to be one of the other styles.
Right.
And to your point about reading the room, checking for pictures, building a connection, that's the charmer in you, making that connection. Whereas our opposite, which would be an examiner, doesn't really do that. They look at an interview like a test, like I said. It really comes down to their qualifications, and they want to be seen as qualified. They want to talk about how they did the job, and they really minimize their personality. They really minimize that outside stuff. And one of the questions I get quite frequently on social media, or hiring managers love to ask, is, what do you do outside of work for fun? That question is very dicey for a lot of reasons.
It is.
But especially depending on your interview style, right? First of all, it's none of their business. You know, we're talking about a job interview, unless you might be interviewing for something that has to do with like your social life, or maybe you're interviewing for a position, you know, I don't know, in events or hospitality or something like that. And they want to know, like, where else do you go out? You know, if you are a magazine editor, they might ask you, what other publications do you read? So that kind of makes sense and tracks. But I think one of the most important things we need to do as hiring managers is ask appropriate questions. And that gets lost because there are a lot of opinions based on your interview style of what people want to know about someone before they hire them. And a lot of it comes down to your interview style.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. That is one question I usually ask everybody, is what do you do for fun? And I do that on purpose only because, like, here we have the one word that describes us all the time is fun. And if I have people who don't want to have fun and are just always like, this is what I do, probably not going to work here. And sometimes my clients too, they'll say that they do this, but I know their culture, I know what they're really looking for. And so I'll ask that question just to pull it out, but it can be dicey. And you have to be very, very careful because you're right, it's none of their business. But I try to get the entire scope of a person too, because they're looking to me of like, who do you recommend to be the best fit for us? Because you know us so well. And I'm like, I got you for the criteria, but I also have you for this person because you're looking for this person. And you guys are all very analytical here. You need to, this is going to tie in real nicely for you without making them all look the same, but at least they understand each other.
Well, as you've experienced some of the challenges with being a recruiter on the outside for another organization or even doing it internally, is that you're hitting up against self-awareness or lack thereof. Correct. So what you may look at an organization and go, you know, you guys need more harmonizers, you guys need some fun or whatever. They may think, no, we don't. And so your heads will butt as an external or internal recruiter. Always. Or just, you know, in general. And that's one of the biggest problems in interviewing, whether you're a job seeker or a hiring manager, is your lack of self-awareness.
Or the opposite.
And the blind
because
spots.
Sometimes they'll say to you, I really want this kind of person, blah, blah, blah. But then the leader of that person says, I'm really looking for this person.
For the opposite.
Right. And you're like,
can you guys get on the same page?
Yeah. And that's awkward sometimes because you're talking over one or the other. And I'm like, so how about we get a little bit of this and a little bit of that and pull it in?
And then what happens is then you have an interview and someone who is not either of those things comes in and they're handsome and they went to the right school and they ran a triathlon and they're like, oh my gosh, this person's amazing.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa. That has nothing to do with any of the stuff that we talked about.
Yep.
And so I always coach hiring managers that one of the best things that you can do ahead of it, especially if you have an external recruiter that will keep you honest, is having an accountability partner, writing down what you want ahead of time. And I don't just mean the job description. I mean all this other stuff.
Yes.
You know your team best. You know the company best. Who would fit in really well? That's what we need in order to figure out. And then it keeps you honest because once you meet the handsome, well-groomed, athletic, competitive, interesting candidate who you're like, never thought I wanted to hire this person, but now I do, because we are swayed by beauty bias.
Totally.
We're swayed by the similar to me effect. We're swayed by this self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm sure it's happened to all of us where you read a resume and there's something on it that you don't like and you're like, I don't like this candidate. And then you meet them and you look for reasons to not like them.
So many times.
Yeah.
And then
Similar
you have to
me.
force yourself to be open-minded, which almost feels hard because we've done it so much. And these are some candid conversations that hiring managers don't have very frequently.
No. Yep.
And it's the most common biases that we all fall prey to.
This similar to me. That's so interesting. I've actually never heard that terminology, but it clicked instantly that, especially if you're running a team, that you want all teammates to do exactly what you did or have the same personality of you, but that is not good. I can talk about this. My team, we do Gallup Strength Finders, which I really like. And we had about 7 people in our team at one point. Every single one, their highest strength was positivity. It's not good. because who's
balancing all of you?
balancing the rest of it, right? But it's interesting, and then we end up hiring some other people that have additional strengths to play upon, the positivity. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's really interesting to be able to hire people that are not like you for the best.
Well, and let's be really honest, it's very difficult. It's difficult to manage diversity, and it's difficult to hire it.
Yes.
And we can just talk about it easily, but it's another thing to, in practice, do it. Because when you're sitting across from someone who's much different than you, it feels uncomfortable. And one of the things I train hiring managers and companies to do is to have one of each interview style in an interview panel. Because if you're a charmer, you're going to be, ooh, that person's really positive and optimistic. I like that. Yeah. And the examiners and challengers are skeptical of charm. And they're going to be like, I don't know. They seem fake. I'm not. They're full of it. You need that balance in the debrief. And as a previous director of talent, I was always by myself in those screening interviews, and as HR people often are. And that makes it really difficult because you don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of. And how great is it when you have a team of rivals, when you have everyone, a charmer, a challenger, an examiner, and a harmonizer, all debriefing together. Because then what happens is the harmonizer who can say, oh, I really liked that they did that. Or it's okay with me that they didn't ask so many questions, because the challenger's going to be like, I don't see them as qualified. They didn't come across as passionate. They didn't ask too many questions. And the harmonizers were like, I wouldn't have. That's not what I do. And so looking past someone's interview performance, because we also know that your interview performance has very little to do with how qualified you are.
Right.
And that the interview itself is not the best way to test someone's ability.
No.
So part of it is looking past that and understanding we all do this differently.
Right.
And how can we understand what our own biases are? As a charmer, I want someone to come in and be passionate. I want them to be on time. I want them to be excited. I want them to be likable. I want them to be well-groomed, like all this stuff. And I also know that if someone comes in like that, I'm going to automatically like them, which is also a problem. That's a bias in a different direction. So then you hire a bunch of people who are like you. That goes back to the similar me effect.
Yeah, interesting.
That's interesting. So true. I think every single company should use Interviewology to train their managers, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about this.
And it's a shame to me, because the most important business decisions are made in job interviews.
They are.
As you know, right? The face of your business changes. The culture changes with a new hire.
It's your oil.
It's very costly.
Yep.
Yet we don't give hiring managers simple tools backed in science and research to teach them how to interview. Where do your interview preferences come from? Why are you hiring who you're hiring? Why are you acting like this? And it's not rocket science. Yeah. It's very simple. And if you can teach hiring managers their preferences, their interview style, and then some of the core things to interview better, the outcomes are so much better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But it's interesting though too, because I've always said that recruiting should have a seat at the table with the CEO as well as HR. And I think that they both are amazing what they bring to the table. But I think recruiting is so important to do it well the first time. I'm so passionate about recruiting. And so when I hear stuff like this, I love more data behind the scenes to say, this is why you do this. And you can talk to them blue in the face, and they still just go back to the other way because it's so much easier. Because most time recruiting is very reactionary, not proaction. And I think we have to change that. And I always tell people, have a bench ready to go that you love this person, give them 2 weeks notice when they come on board or you need them. Otherwise, you're constantly being reactionary, and it's so costly to a company. So costly.
Absolutely. Anthony Greenwald, who's the father of a lot of the implicit bias research and science, said that an organization isn't going to change unless they see the numbers behind it and some data.
Yes.
And the way I have conversations with CEOs is, let me test your hiring managers, and I'm going to tell you where your biases are in the organization. And I work for an organization here in Philadelphia, and I've tested over 800 of their hiring managers. When we first started, I had tested about 135. And in the normal population, in the general population, there's a normal distribution in our data, which means that there aren't, not all women are charmers and not all African Americans are harmonizers.
Right.
It means that there is a normal distribution of 4 interview styles. So when I go into an organization and I test the hiring managers, I can tell what they're positively reinforcing in interviews. This organization had 76% challengers.
Wow.
And I was like, I'll tell you exactly what you need to do right now to train them, to change your culture. And to your point, recruiting is the forefront. You are the gatekeeper of the culture of the business.
I totally absolutely.
And I couldn't agree with you more. So you are not just a business partner. As a director of talent for Connor Strong, where I worked before I started my business, I hired over 80% of the organization by the time I left. Me, myself. Of course, I partnered with the executives, and they did the second and third round interviews, the technical rounds.
You.
But I was the initial gatekeeper. And what would have happened, and I was way more biased back then.
Sure.
Well, we all are.
We all are.
Yeah.
So we have to take a look, and we have to train our hiring managers how to do this. Otherwise, you're creating incredibly biased, lopsided cultures.
You are.
That have 76% challengers. And then how does that 10% of harmonizers feel, or 2%?
Yeah.
You'd feel very lonely.
Unheard.
Yeah.
Really unheard. Yeah.
There's no balance.
There's no balance.
So we're going to come to a close here, but anybody could go online as a job seeker or a hiring manager and take the assessment to find out which interview style they are.
That's right.
And you do speaking engagements for companies. You train hiring managers. You have great social media. Is there anything else I'm missing in the ways people can find you?
Geez, no. Well, wherever you get your social media, you can find me there. I offer free tips on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. It's really important to me that we democratize how we do this. And so I train both hiring managers and job seekers. I do keynotes, I do professional development training. But if you yourself are just sitting there thinking, man, I haven't interviewed in a while and I want to look for a new job, go to my website, theinterviewology.com, and take it's just 20 questions. And like you said earlier, you'll receive a 40-page customized workbook with your name throughout it on everything that you need to prepare for your next interview, right down to what to wear, but also 10 questions to ask after you get an offer to get a bigger offer. I wanted to really give you everything. And then obviously questions to prepare for and coaching.
Sounds like a bargain, Anna. I have to tell you. With everything else so expensive out there and having all that ready for you and getting it moving, and it's behind, knowing what you are as a personality, that's huge.
Thank you. Yeah. And for your listeners, if you use the code O'Connor, I'll give you 50% off.
Awesome.
And follow me on
Thank
social
you.
media for a bunch of free tips as well.
We'll definitely put that out. Now,
That's all O's, by the way. OCONNOR.
good call, Marcia. So since this is HR After Dark, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Okay.
Tell me like the craziest interview questions you've heard.
Oh, man. I did a social media post a couple months ago. There was a trend on TikTok where you would dance really silly and, dance on conference room tables and things like that, and put it to some of the most inappropriate questions I had heard asked in interviews. I feel uncomfortable even sharing them, to be honest with you, because these were things I overheard, or unfortunately things my students would come back and report to me. So some of the most inappropriate I heard asked was, one of my students came back and told me, she's an Indian woman, and she told me that she walked into an interview and the gentleman, the CEO of an insurance brokerage, said, "Oh, Indian, dot or feather."
Wow.
I also heard, I could fill another 10 minutes. There's some inappropriate questions. It's mostly always to women, in my experience.
Why am I not surprised?
Men love to ask questions about your marital status, if you're pregnant.
Oh, all the time.
How many children do you have? Are you planning on having more children?
I have to laugh.
I have to laugh. Pregnant too, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Asking that question when they're not pregnant, that's a little embarrassing, but it does happen quite a bit.
Incredibly inappropriate questions about family planning. I myself am victim to it, kind of frequently. One of the number one Google searches about me is Anna Papalia husband. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Wow.
No.
And people do it a ton in interviews to women.
Yeah.
What does your husband do? What does that have to do with whether or not I can write a book or teach you how to interview?
Yeah.
It's so funny when you say that. And I was buying my very first car, and my dad went with me to, I was up north, Bucks County, and I went in there, and, he went right to my dad. And my dad looked at him, he's like, "What are you talking to me for? She's the one buying the car." And I was like, "I want a new sales guy." And I did. I got another sales guy because I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, stop thinking just because my dad's here. Like, I'm buying the car with my money. And it happens all the time. You know?
It's much deeper than an interview.
Oh, yeah.
all of
for
this,
sure.
right?
Well, the interview is, sorry to keep going,
No,
but
you're
the interview is just this microcosm of our society.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we can point to so many issues in interviews, but it's really the broader issue that's at play. Right before here, I was at a doctor's appointment, a female doctor. We were discussing something. I'm like, why am I back here? I thought it was, whatever. It was just confusing. And she was like, oh, you needed to talk this over with your husband. I said, my who? My what? I did a what? I did no. That was not happening. A female doctor told me that. That's wild. I was like, what? So it's pervasive in our culture. And there are a lot of things that are pervasive. Ageism, sexism, and racism really affect the interview process.
Oh, yeah.
And if we don't talk about that, we'll never change. And it's a lightning rod on social media. I make some post about it sometimes, and people are either like, thank you for saying something, or
go the other.
this is crazy. This doesn't happen. So it's a huge problem.
I can totally attest to it. It is a huge problem. And I always tell people, I'm like, would it make any difference if we were all blind? If we were all blind, would it make a difference of who you had hired? And
I have a great example. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
So this is a great example. So we had this opportunity during COVID when we started doing Zoom interviews where we could have really done this. But so back in the 80s, orchestras were notoriously male dominated, and they wanted to diversify orchestras. They wanted to hire more women and more African Americans. And what a great opportunity they had, because you can do blind auditions, to your point.
Right.
Like, wouldn't this be easier? So they would have the stage all set up like normal, and you would come out with your instrument and play your instrument. But nothing was happening. No, they were still picking men, and they couldn't figure out why, because these were blind auditions. And then someone very smart said, well, it's because women always wear high heels. And when they come out on the stage, the judges automatically hear the high heel and make the implicit biased choice.
Wow.
That must be a woman. So you know what they started doing? They started doing auditions in socked feet.
Good.
And they hired more women than they ever had before.
Wow.
So with this is an interesting opportunity during COVID where I was hoping, I think it would be great and really cool that if we did more Zoom interviews, that the cameras were off, especially for first rounds. And the future of job interviewing is taking a lot of information off resumes, like your address, for example, even where you went to college. Google actually famously did a study on internally, they thought their best executives went to all of the Ivy League schools.
Oh, yeah.
And then they checked themselves to their credit, and they did an internal study, and they found, oh, no, actually, no, they didn't all go to Brown, Yale, and IT. They went to all these other places. So they realized that we're just going to take it off the resumes. Where you went to college and where you live and what your name is has nothing to do with whether or not you can do the job, but what happens is it leads to tons of implicit bias with hiring managers. Because we know African Americans, it takes them more applications to get a job interview scheduled. If you live somewhere that's too far, according to the hiring manager, whatever that subjective thing is, they won't even
all the time.
look. All these things. So what if we just took all that off and just had it about your qualifications, your job experience, to your point, and did some blind Zoom interviews? It would change the culture and the faces of our organizations immediately.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But why don't we do that?
You know what? Because we're two creatures of comfort. And we like to touch and feel and see, I think we're making the right decision. And we want to look like you. We want to look like me, kind of a deal, instead of just being who they are. It's coming around, too, but I don't think a lot of society is fully okay with it still yet. I think they're still afraid of it.
I also think that as humans, we think we're smarter than we are.
Oh, yeah.
And we think we have more control than we do.
Yep.
And when you kind of pull out of it, you realize just how biased you really are. And no one wants to say that. It was one of the big lessons I learned in writing this book. And spoiler alert, I'm going to ruin the end of my book for you. But it was in discovering interview styles, I realized how to be more open-minded.
Yeah.
And how I had been incredibly biased before, and how important it is that we need everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to read the whole thing. I think you're a trailblazer.
Thank you.
I love this. I think this was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to go out and buy this book. And, of course, listen to our conversation today, and that will be a
Take the
great
assessment.
thing. take the assessment.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
get your interviewology
Yeah.
profile. I think that's the first step. Figure out your interview style. And then the book outlines all 4 interview styles. And then follow me on social for tons of tips on how to do this.
Yeah,
how to apply it.
I watch you daily, so it's been fun.
Yeah, I have to get I got to be a TikToker eventually.
Yeah, it's okay. I post the same videos on Instagram,
All right,
so
I'll
that's
follow you on
okay.
Instagram.
I'm not a
Instagram works.
TikToker, but I'll do
That
this
works too.
So, all right. Well, thank you again. Thanks
Thank
for
you so
joining
much for
us.
having
And
me.
thank you everybody for listening. And we will see you next time on HR After Dark.